Yes, so thanks again, Isabel. I will be covering the first phase of a patient preference study, as you've seen in the figure of Isabel. That is the design phase. And we'll have a look at how patients can be involved in this phase as researchers, as partners. And for that, I will be using the paving study as a case example. And it was a study that was done in the Prefer project, where we had a look at what patient preferences are regarding hemophilia treatments, more specifically gene therapies and prophylactic factor replacement therapy. So the aims of that study was dus in the context of a choice between gene therapy and prophylactic factor replacement therapy to first of all design an educational tool to meet gene therapy information needs of people with hemophilia. And this was the first aim, as we wanted them to be informed about gene therapy before asking any questions about it. Then the second aim was to identify treatment features important to hemophilia patients and then to quantify the trade-offs that these patients are willing to make. And so for today, we'll focus on how we then involved patients throughout the design here. A bit of context. This study was conducted within my PhD research at the University of Leuven when I was still there. And we worked with RTI on the project. And the sponsor was IMI Prefer. For the study, we set up a stakeholder advisory board that was specific to the paving study, where we wanted to include all types of different stakeholders to ensure that we would meet their needs regarding the design of the study. So this was HTA payers, regulators, industry, clinicians, but most importantly for today, also patient organizations and patients. So we worked with a couple of European patient organizations, but also the local Belgian hemophilia patient organization. Now regarding our methods and where we then involved patients exactly. So we started with a literature review where we had a look at what preference method we could use in this study, what method would work best here. And in the end, this was the threshold technique. We also identified treatment features that could be important in this context based on clinical trials with gene therapies, but also past hemophilia patient preference studies. We then had meetings with the advisory board, including thus patients themselves, where we discussed what classes of treatment features or attributes could be important in this context, and also where we discussed the study design quality needs. We then went on with a first phase of the study itself, where we had interviews with Belgian hemophilia patients, 20 in total, where we wanted to see what factors would influence their choice, what their information needs were, what top treatment features were important to them in making that decision. And then we conducted a survey with Belgian hemophilia patients, where we just first had that educational tool that I talked about before asking them any questions regarding gene therapy. And then when we were asking those questions on gene therapy, we were able to identify trade-offs that these patients are willing to make, but also the acceptability of gene therapy profiles to them. And now regarding patient involvement, I already mentioned that they were involved in the advisory board. We also piloted the interviews with them, and they provided input regarding what information to provide to patient participants. And for the survey, we also again piloted the survey with them, and they especially had I think a very big role in the development of the educational tool. And on that part, I want to focus today, just to give you a very concrete example of how we involved patients as partners in this step. So here you see the process of how we created the educational tool for gene therapy. As previously mentioned already, we based it on the literature, but then had pilot interviews with patient representatives where they provided input on the correctness of the information provided in the interview guide, but also how comprehensible the information was to patient participants. There's also lay patients and consistency between translations, because as we did the study in Belgium, we had to work in 2 languages, Dutch and French. So there had also to be some consistency between the 2 versions. And patient representatives were very helpful here. Then we developed the script for the educational tool. This was informed by interviews with hemophilia patients, where we just were able to identify their information needs. We then validated this with hematologists, checked it again with patient representatives, and there again, they were able to provide this input regarding correctness, comprehensibility, and consistency. And then in the last phase, we also piloted it with lay hemophilia patients to make sure that the educational tool was comprehensible to all types of patients. So in the end, we were able to develop a tool that was interactive, had visual animations, voiceovers, and was engaging enough for patients. To go through the different modules and answer the different questions that we had afterwards. So in conclusion, I would like to say that by involving patients from the beginning as collaborators, we were able to pilot and review all of the materials to identify information needs of participants, but most importantly, I think to ensure the 3 C's, let's say, of this presentation, so correctness, comprehensibility, and consistency of the material.